What is a primary function of the European Court of Human Rights, ECHR, concerning data protection? A. Enforces GDPR provisions. B. Interprets the ECHR and Convention 108. C. Proposes new European data protection laws. D. Reviews EU member state compliance. Correct answer: B. Interprets the ECHR and Convention 108. Explanation: the ECHR interprets the European Convention on Human Rights, which includes provisions relevant to data protection and privacy. It ensures that member states comply with these human rights laws, including those related to personal data. What was a key difference between Convention 108 and the EU Data Protection Directive? A. Convention 108 is a legally binding treaty. B. The directive applies to all EU countries automatically. C. Convention 108 harmonizes data protection laws globally. D. The directive sets principles only for the private sector. Correct answer: A. Convention 108 is a legally binding treaty. Explanation: Convention 108, established by the Council of Europe, created a legally binding framework for its signatories, whereas the EU Data Protection Directive required transposition into national laws by each EU member state to be effective. How did the GDPR's approach to data protection differ from the Data Protection Directive? A. The GDPR is directly applicable across member states. B. The GDPR introduces new privacy rights. C. The GDPR enforces stricter penalties. D. The GDPR harmonizes with the OECD guidelines. Correct answer: A. The GDPR is directly applicable across member states. Explanation: the GDPR represents a unified regulation that applies directly to all EU member states, eliminating the need for transposition into national laws, unlike the directive, which required each country to create its own version. What is the significance of Convention 108+? A. It creates new data protection standards. B. It aligns with the GDPR. C. It harmonizes standards globally. D. It introduces stricter penalties for data breaches. Correct answer: B. It aligns with the GDPR. Explanation: Convention 108+ modernizes the original Convention 108, ensuring its provisions align with the GDPR, thus harmonizing data protection standards across Europe and beyond. How does the Treaty of Lisbon affect data protection in Europe? A. It introduces new data protection laws. B. It integrates the CFR-EU into European law. C. It harmonizes standards across the EU. D. It reviews GDPR compliance. Correct answer: B. It integrates the CFR-EU into European law. Explanation: the Treaty of Lisbon made the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the EU legally binding, thereby incorporating its provisions, including the right to data protection, directly into European law. How did the OECD guidelines contribute to early data protection efforts? A. They harmonized data protection laws globally. B. They created binding standards for EU countries. C. They set principles for global data flows. D. They revised existing data protection directives. Correct answer: C. They set principles for global data flows. Explanation: the 1980 OECD guidelines provided guidelines for the responsible handling of personal data in a global economy, establishing key principles for the collection and use of personal data worldwide. How does the CFR-EU differ from the ECHR? A. The CFR-EU is directly integrated into EU law. B. The CFR-EU focuses exclusively on data protection. C. The CFR-EU is a non-binding framework. D. The CFR-EU introduces stricter penalties. Correct answer: A. The CFR-EU is directly integrated into EU law. Explanation: the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the EU was integrated into European law through the Treaty of Lisbon, making its provisions, including the right to data protection, legally binding. How did Convention 108 expand on the OECD guidelines? A. It introduced binding legal obligations. B. It harmonized standards across Europe. C. It revised existing EU directives. D. It introduced new data protection rights. Correct answer: A. It introduced binding legal obligations. Explanation: Convention 108 created a legally binding framework for its signatories, providing comprehensive data protection principles that applied across Europe and beyond. What role does the European Court of Justice, ECJ, play in data protection? A. It interprets EU law. B. It enforces GDPR compliance. C. It proposes new data protection laws. D. It reviews member state data protection policies. Correct answer. A. It interprets EU law. Explanation. The ECJ interprets and clarifies EU law, including the GDPR, to assist national courts in upholding European data protection standards and resolving disputes. What does the European Court of Human Rights do in the context of data protection? A. Interprets the ECHR and related treaties. B. Enforces EU data protection laws. C. Enacts laws impacting privacy. D. Reviews GDPR compliance. Correct answer. A. Interprets the ECHR and related treaties. How did the GDPR strengthen data protection laws in the EU? A. It created a unified regulation directly applicable across member states. B. It introduced new privacy rights and obligations. C. It revised existing EU directives. D. It enforced standardized data retention policies. Correct answer. A. It created a unified regulation directly applicable across member states. How does the Treaty of Lisbon impact data protection in Europe? A. It integrates the CFR-EU into European law. B. It enforces GDPR across member states. C. It introduces new data protection regulations. D. It strengthens penalties for privacy violations. Correct answer. A. It integrates the CFR-EU into European law. How did Brexit impact data protection laws in the UK? A. The UK implemented its own data protection regime. B. The UK ceased all data protection agreements with the EU. C. The UK fully adopted the GDPR. D. The UK harmonised its laws with Convention 108+. Correct answer. A. The UK implemented its own data protection regime. What was the role of the OECD guidelines in early data protection efforts? A. They harmonised data protection laws worldwide. B. They created binding standards for EU countries. C. They established principles for global data flows. D. They revised existing data protection directives. Correct answer. C. They established principles for global data flows. What was a key contribution of the Data Protection Directive, 1995? A. It harmonised data protection laws across the EU. B. It replaced Convention 108. C. It introduced new privacy rights. D. It enforced stricter penalties for data breaches. Correct answer. A. It harmonised data protection laws across the EU. What does the ECHR primarily protect? A. Data protection. B. Privacy rights. C. Economic freedoms. D. Freedom of expression. Correct answer. B. Privacy rights. How does the CFR-EU differ from the ECHR? A. The CFR-EU directly integrates into EU law. B. The CFR-EU focuses exclusively on data protection. C. The CFR-EU is a non-binding framework. D. The CFR-EU introduces stricter penalties. Correct answer. A. The CFR-EU directly integrates into EU law. How did Convention 108 expand on the OECD guidelines? A. It introduced binding legal obligations. B. It harmonized standards across Europe. C. It revised existing EU directives. D. It introduced new data protection rights. Correct answer. A. It introduced binding legal obligations. What was a key aim of the GDPR? A. To harmonize data protection laws across the EU. B. To replace the ECHR. C. To establish stricter penalties for privacy violations. D. To enforce national data protection laws. Correct answer. A. To harmonize data protection laws across the EU. What is a major difference between the GDPR and the Data Protection Directive? A. The GDPR is directly applicable across member states. B. The GDPR enforces stricter penalties. C. The GDPR introduces new privacy rights. D. The GDPR harmonizes standards with Convention 108. Correct answer. A. The GDPR is directly applicable across member states. How does Convention 108 Plus address modern challenges? A. It aligns its provisions with the GDPR. B. It introduces new privacy rights. C. It enforces standardized data retention policies. D. It revises the OECD guidelines. Correct answer. A. It aligns its provisions with the GDPR. What is a key aspect of the UK's data protection regime post-Brexit? A. It incorporates GDPR principles. B. It diverges entirely from EU law. C. It harmonizes with Convention 108 plus. D. It enforces stricter penalties than the GDPR. Correct answer. A. It incorporates GDPR principles. How does the Council of Europe contribute to data protection? A. It harmonizes standards across its member states. B. It enforces data protection laws. C. It introduces new privacy rights. D. It reviews GDPR compliance. Correct answer. A. It harmonizes standards across its member states. How does the GDPR's harmonization impact businesses? A. It simplifies compliance across the EU. B. It introduces stricter penalties. C. It revises existing EU directives. D. It limits international data transfers. Correct answer. A. It simplifies compliance across the EU. What role does the EDPB play in European data protection? A. It issues guidance on the GDPR. B. It enforces data protection laws. C. It reviews privacy complaints. D. It harmonizes standards across Europe. Correct answer. A. It issues guidance on the GDPR. How does the CFR-EU strengthen data protection in Europe? A. It enshrines the right to data protection. B. It harmonizes data protection standards. C. It introduces new privacy laws. D. It reviews GDPR compliance. Correct answer. A. It enshrines the right to data protection. What does the Lisbon Treaty achieve in the context of data protection? A. It gives binding legal force to the CFR-EU. B. It harmonizes standards across Europe. C. It replaces the Data Protection Directive. D. It introduces new privacy rights. Correct answer. A. It gives binding legal force to the CFR-EU.